Warning, this video will be discussing topics such as SA, abuse, and things like that, so if that's going to make you uncomfortable, I highly recommend you skip this one. This video is also not appropriate for children, nor is it appropriate for fans of the book Haunting Adeline or its author H.D. Carlton. This video is not for you if you're one of those things, so click off now if that applies to you. Take care. Thank you. Recently, I made a video critiquing the fact that Haunting Adeline, the book, is getting a movie, and it actually did pretty well. Some people did agree with me that a movie like this, if handled poorly, which it absolutely will be, could definitely be harmful to certain audiences. Other people did put words in my mouth and said I wanted this movie banned. I do not want this movie banned. I just think it's not a very good idea to make this movie, considering the very poor messaging behind the book. Literally, the entire plot is that a woman falls in love with her rapist and dates him. That is literally the plot. She falls in love with the man who abuses her repeatedly and stalks her, who breaks into her house, who does all these horrible things to her, and she falls in love with him. And personally, I just think the book wasn't handled very well, and that a movie based on this book could be quite dangerous. The worst thing I said in that video is that we don't really need a movie like this that muddies the line between what rape actually is. But not once did I say I want this movie banned. I don't want it banned, I just want it handled properly, which I know it will not be, which is why I think it's a bad idea. But the whole thing got me thinking to myself, what would Haunting Adeline be like if it was handled seriously? What would this story have been like if Adeline didn't fall in love with her rapist? What would it actually be like? And what would this book be like if it wasn't a dark romance and didn't try to romanticize what Zaid does to Adeline? Good question. I admittedly skim-read this book the first time I read it because I was giving it a try at first, you know, but after a while I just became kind of wildly uncomfortable and skim-read the rest of it because I just didn't really want to read in-depth scenes. It's just not what I'm about, so I did admittedly skim-read half of it. I'm sorry, my bad. But for this video, I read through it again and picked apart some parts that I would definitely change, specifically the main part being Zaid and Adeline's relationship. Mainly being I would not have this be a relationship at all. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. There were a couple of minor things that I would change about this book. I'm gonna try and keep it as close to the original as possible, because I feel like if with just a few minor tweaks, this could have been a very compelling story. But due to its genre and the author behind it, it seemingly didn't do that. So there's just a couple of minor changes that I would make, and then the big part being Zaid and Adeline's relationship. The first minor thing that I wanted to change was that someone in my comments pointed out that within this book, there was racism towards Latino men. So on my second read-through, I tried to keep my eye out, and I indeed did see some very stereotypical writing with how the author has written the Latino characters. Which is a little confusing since, the author is Puerto Rican, so I don't really understand that, but, okay. So if I were to, change a minor thing about this book, I would definitely remove any stereotypical portrayals of any specific races. That is completely unnecessary to the story to have them be so stereotypical. There was absolutely no need for it. And apparently, in the sequel, Haunting Adeline, which I am absolutely never going to read, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, a commenter pointed out that in that book, Adeline's traffickers are specifically stated by the book to have Hispanic accents. Why was that necessary? Why are their races important here? So yeah, that would be my first point of action, to remove any stereotypical language surrounding ethnic minorities. The second thing that I would alter in the story is the very strange portrayal of human trafficking. Many people have pointed out how inaccurate this book is in terms of human trafficking, some even saying it is straight up QAnon fanfiction. Their reasoning being that in this book there is a secret cabal of these elites in the world who run this sex trafficking ring, and Zaid is this hacker trying to bring them down, which some people say is straight up QAnon stuff. This post on Reddit goes into a lot more detail than the comment that I just read from. This person said it felt like QAnon fanfiction because of the inclusion of trafficking and also child sacrifice rituals, specifically involving drinking the blood of the children, which involves these top government leaders, like I said, these elites. They also point out that Zaid goes under the alias Z, just like Q, that he also aims to bring down the government, and they feel that the author took this conspiracy theory and then made a romance novel out of it, which, I don't know if she did that deliberately, but some people are seeing some very specific comparisons, which leads them to believe that they feel like this is just QAnon fanfiction. A commenter under this thread said that they liked this book, and that they saw one of the author's Q&A, like they were asking her questions and she answered it. Someone asked her if this book was based on QAnon. She herself apparently said that she didn't even know what that is. So take this with a grain of salt, though. I don't have a screenshot of this. This is all coming from this commenter's words, saying that she didn't know what QAnon is. Some people were just accusing her of lying. Others were accusing her of anti-Semitism because of the whole shady group who runs the world and drinks the blood of children. They said that is a very anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Someone also said that she gave 2 of the senators Jewish names who were running this child sex trafficking ring, which is true. She did use some stereotypical Jewish names in this book.
Hey guys, it's Editing Space Thing here. I'm about halfway through editing the video, and I just found something out that I had no idea about while making this video. I wish I could have included this in a non-editing segment, but oh my god, I just found out that H.D. Carlton, the author of this book, had to pull it from being sold and had to rewrite certain parts of it because of how anti-Semitic it was. And I thought the version that I was reading was pretty bad. I'm really not sure which version I have. I got this second-hand, so I did not buy this from Amazon or wherever. I got this off of Vinted. I might have the original version because I'm still seeing the stuff about blood sacrifice and stuff. Oh my god! But I've already sold my copy since I finished reading it because I no longer want that on my shelf. But yeah. Oh my god. The more you know.
And that kind of does go back to my first point about racial stereotypes. This, in this case, is a religious stereotype, but at the same time, it is still highly inappropriate to put in a book like this. In fact, any book, this sort of messaging is very dangerous, so I would definitely remove any and all of that. But that is also included in my second point that I would change. I would get rid of any and all conspiracy theory related stuff, the whole QAnon stuff that seems to be going on here. Whether she agrees with it or not, it does line up pretty well with QAnon conspiracy theories. I would just completely remove this sort of messaging from the book, regardless of if it was intentional. And if I was going to keep the human trafficking subplot, because I did want to keep it as similar to the book as possible, I would definitely portray it in a more realistic way that was not based upon conspiracy theories. Like I said, I don't know if she did or not. She denies it, apparently, but at the same time, many people were getting the same sort of vibe from this, that this was sort of QAnon fanfiction, so I would definitely remove all of that. I would keep human trafficking in the plot because, like I said, I want to keep it as similar to the original as possible. However, I would very much dial back the focus from the specifics of the human trafficking because I feel like when the author portrayed it in the book, most of the scenes were incredibly inaccurate to how actual child trafficking takes place. And I feel like using it as a sort of backlog in Zaid's brain could be a good expansion on his character, which is another semi-minor thing I would change about the book. Zaid as a character. See, the main thing that I saw about Zaid in this book, like many other predators, Zaid doesn't really seem to have any particular motivation behind what he does to Adeline. He simply does it because he's attracted to her and wants to make her love him. And what chapter was it? I really am fumbling with my notes here. I really did write too much. I found it. Okay, at the start of chapter 19, he starts it off by saying he does not regret what he did after he just her and left her in tears as he walked away. He said that he doesn't regret it. He then rationalizes it to himself, saying that her actions aren't the same as her words, that while she was saying she didn't want it, her body was saying something different, which is literal rape speak, by the way. It's extremely clear that this character is very messed up in the head. He is literally saying that he is going to assault her until she likes it, until her words start matching her actions, which, yeah, this guy is super messed up. And he does all of this simply because he's attracted to her and wants her to love him, so he's taking that by force, which is just foul, by the way. People call this a love story, by the way. And the reason that I bring this up after, talking about the human trafficking stuff, at one point, Zaid is rescuing a girl from human trafficking, and he says that her freckles reminds him of Adeline, so he wants to punch someone for touching her. And this part revealed it. Well, I knew from the very beginning, but this part shows just how unhinged Zaid is, but it's never really explored well enough. All we really know about him is that he's a hacker who wants to take down child trafficking rings. But at the same time, he is a hypocrite. He saves people from being hurt, and then he goes on to hurt someone because he wants her to love him. And I just feel like this isn't explored enough. It is clear that the job he works and the things he sees have completely desensitized him and ruined his perception of what love is, and I feel like that is a very compelling part of the story, but it is shoved on the back burner to show how Adeline slowly falls in love with him. I felt like Zaid as a character was so underused, and the fact he turned from something that was malevolent and scary into something romantic and desirable is quite disturbing, and I feel like this could have been done in so many different ways. Zaid is shown to be a sort of hero when he's doing his job, but then the second he gets off the job, he goes off and this random woman because he wants her to love him. And I feel like this could have been done so much better, but it just wasn't, because he was made into this romantic, desirable figure instead of showing his descent into just depravity. I feel like his obsession with Adeline should have fully consumed him as a character, because as dark as that sounds, this is a very dark story. And I feel like showing his descent into depravity could be a cautionary tale into how such dangerous things, viewing it day in, day out, can desensitize you and make you view things differently. Because if Zaid starts becoming so obsessed with Adeline that, he's going to assault her, I feel like that, at some point, is going to completely consume him. And I feel like that obsession should have been shown to get so bad that he starts screwing up his job and it starts taking over his life, making him become even more of a monster. Because Zaid is not a good guy. Just because he saves children doesn't mean he's also not a rapist. And I feel like him being a rapist is extremely overlooked. Even the author says, in her apology video, I quote apology, it was terrible in my opinion, she acknowledges that Zaid is a hypocrite. That is a massive part of his character. But I feel like that is so underused. And I feel like at some point, if I was to rewrite this, I would have his obsession with Adeline become so prevalent that it completely takes over his life, it ruins his work, he starts not doing his work properly, that he just becomes so violent and depraved that it gets him done in. In my version, I would have him confuse someone else with Adeline and then just do something absolutely horrific to them. Because in my version, he becomes so obsessed with Adeline that it basically takes over his life. So if he's walking down the street at night and he sees someone who looks like Adeline, he's going to go crazy. Because like I've said, in my version, his obsession becomes so bad, it essentially drives him even more crazy than he actually is. Because let's be real, the man is depraved enough in the book to rape her several times. I don't put it past him to get even worse. In the book, Zaid is shown to be very particular and meticulous with what he does to Adeline. He makes sure to leave no trace of what he does. He deletes her police reports so that they have nothing on him and sort of makes her look crazy and isolates her from everyone. In my version, however, he still remains smart at the beginning of the novel. But as he goes on and keeps doing these despicable things to Adeline, I would have his obsession get so bad that he starts becoming very sloppy. He becomes so consumed by the idea of being with Adeline and being in love with her that he, starts making some mistakes. And also further, lose his mind. The scene I mentioned before, where he mistook a little girl for Adeline and therefore got very possessive of her, due to how depraved Zaid is in the book, I would personally not go down that route of him mistaking that child for Adeline. However, that scene did inspire me to write something different. You see, like I said Zaid gets a bit sloppy and starts to lose his mind. So I would have it that one night when he's going to see Adeline in his, van, truck, whatever, he sees someone on the street who visually resembles Adeline, and he goes berserk. He is furious that Adeline is out by herself at this time, even though it's not Adeline, because he has previously raped her because she got intimate with another man. So he is furious at this. In his mind, Adeline is disobeying him, walking around at night, you know. In his mind, he thinks she's looking for men to sleep with. So he stops the car because he's furious, pulls out some rope and some tape, because that is what he used in chapter 18 to bind and gag Adeline as he assaults her. In my eyes, he would say something like, "Why are we out so late all by ourselves, little mouse?" as he's just totally mental. Uses the tape to cover her mouth before she has a chance to, you know, reveal that she's not Adeline. Drags her in the back of the van, ties her up, and then drives off. But before he drives off, he logs onto his sort of hacker database and disables all the local security cameras in the area. Because while he is getting sloppy and mistaking random people for Adeline, he does remember that he can get caught at any minute, so he does disable the cameras so that people can't see what he's done. So while this woman is like screaming in the back, he's driving her to the area surrounding Adeline's house. He essentially hauls this random woman inside Adeline's house. He was driving to Adeline's house to see her, but then he sees who he thinks is Adeline walking the streets at night, so he just drags her home essentially, but Adeline is still in the house. And at this point, Adeline herself was fast asleep, but all this commotion just suddenly woke her up. She's so confused as she thinks her stalker is breaking into her house again to hurt her, but then she hears somebody else, so she gets up and has a look. And I would try and achieve this reveal through the dual POV system. I would have Zaid's POV be so deranged that we as an audience think this is genuinely Adeline walking around at night. But then, once he takes her in the van and brings her home, I would have it switch to Adeline's POV, where she's fast asleep. And at first I would try to have the readers believe that this is Adeline, because I would have the woman in the trunk pass out at some point from all the screaming. She just passes out. So then it switches to Adeline, where she's like passed out sleeping, so they think, oh my god, she's been kidnapped. But then you realise she wakes up in her own house, and hears the kerfuffle downstairs. As if him kidnapping her off the streets wouldn't be enough, this would be the point that shows he's totally gone crazy. And I would have this be the moment where he gets caught, because Adeline would peek her head round the door and hear this happening downstairs, and I would have her hide in the closet at this point, because she's terrified. She grabs her phone, and then she calls the police, saying that someone's broken into her house, bringing someone else with him who looks like she's struggling, who looks like she's been kidnapped. The person on the phone would say that police are on their way and that she needs to stay on the line, but she says she needs to be quiet because they're coming upstairs. They say, just be quiet, stay on the line, don't go anywhere. And Adeline just has to sit quietly and watch this random person be tortured because he thinks that's Adeline. And while Zaid has been able to evade police before by deleting reports and trying to keep himself anonymous, at this point he physically can't do anything because he doesn't know police are coming, and there's also many of them surrounding the house and inside the house. So when he tries to leave through one of the windows, there's people at the bottom waiting for him to jump out. There is just too many people for him to avoid. And personally, I was unsure on how to end my version of this story, because many victims do absolutely not get justice in stuff like court and the legal system. But I did want to have Zaid be caught in the end, because his obsession just starts to consume him that much that he will do something so crazy and so drastic, kidnapping a random woman who he thought was Adeline off the streets because he's that obsessed with her and wants to keep her to himself. What I do know is that I wanted to end the story on a positive, with Adeline and the other victim at hand going through therapy, but also showing that what Zaid did to them did leave them with long-lasting trauma that is going to, unfortunately, follow them around for a while. But I did want to show them trying to work through it, because these characters deserve nothing but peace from what they've been through. In the actual book, Adeline ends up becoming engaged to her rapist, and that is absolutely not what I wanted for my version of the story. I want Adeline to realise what happened to her was not her fault, and that she did not deserve the vicious abuse that Zaid put her through, and absolutely they do not end up engaged whatsoever. In an ideal world, people like Zaid do get what's coming to them and do get punished, but unfortunately, lots of rapists do go free because let's just say the courts are very unfair towards victims. So unfortunately, in the real world, someone like Zaid would not be put behind bars. And if he was, he probably wouldn't even be imprisoned for that long, because sentencing for perpetrators of this sort of violence is insanely low. But in this story, Zaid is a notorious hacker who has also killed multiple people. There's a whole murder investigation because Zaid has killed multiple people through this novel, even mailing Adeline somebody's hands, which is the man that she slept with. So once the police catch him, they'll probably find all these links to who he is and find out that he is this killer. Even if he's killing bad people, he's still killed people, which would get him in trouble with the police regardless. So while victims usually don't get justice in the court, Zaid is an overall terrible person and has killed people in the story, so if police were to catch him, they could definitely link him to these events and identify him as Z, the vigilante hacker who has killed people, and that could therefore get him a bigger sentence. So personally, I feel like that because Zaid has also murdered people as well as the various assaults that he's committed, I feel like Zaid would get a very high prison sentence. I feel like he would get life. I feel like he would also face, that penalty because he had killed multiple people, but at the same time, I feel like because he's so crazy, they could just chuck him in prison. And personally, I still think Zaid is just totally out of his mind and is still completely obsessed with Adeline, so I feel like if he got put away in prison, he would try and escape just to come and get her again, and I feel like he would try that and would fail and therefore be probably I feel like that would be a fitting end for Zaid, being so obsessed that he tries to escape prison and try and get Adeline back, and then just shot in the process because, tons of guards and stuff trying to get out. He'd probably be shot. And here I am saying that would be a smaller point, and I've just ranted about that for about 15 minutes. Whoa! But yeah, personally, that would be how I would change Zaid's character in the story. I would have him become so consumed by his obsession that he ends up losing his mind further and further to the point where he confuses a stranger on the street for Adeline and ends up getting himself caught. And I know I mentioned it in that segment, but the final point as to what I would change about this book is to exclude any and all romantic aspects. Some people, after reading this book, said Adeline develops a severe Stockholm syndrome to Zaid because of the sheer amount of abuse he puts her through, which she absolutely does. It's just the book handles this very poorly. She does end up falling in love with Zaid, which people say, oh, that's because she has Stockholm syndrome, that's why she falls in love with him. But her best friend in this book tells her that this is normal and that she should go and bang him. She is unable to work through her Stockholm syndrome because everyone else around her just reinforces it that, oh my god, it's just because he loves you. The fact that she starts falling in love with him as a trauma response is not the issue. It's the fact that this book paints this as romantic instead of something horrifying. Chapter 21 is when Adeline has this discussion with her friend about whether it was consensual or not. Her friend asked her, was it consensual? And it says, I shake my head no. But then she says on the next page, it wasn't consensual at first. And then do you want to know what her friend does? Her friend calls her a slut. Her friend has just admitted that she was assaulted, and her first response was to call her a slut. I get that this was the author trying to be quirky and funny, but oh my god, this is supposed to be handling sexual assault. This is how the author handles sexual assault in her books. Oh my god, as if it's some joke. Her friend then says that what he did was oddly nice when Adeline says that, he was just trying to be himself. Adeline had just admitted that she was assaulted, and this is how the author chooses to handle it. The messaging of this book is so terrible I could cry. But instead of comforting her and trying to encourage her to, report this, the two of them just get drunk with her best friend, hyping her up saying, go sleep with your stalker. And then in the next scene, Zaid shows up and he does assault her again. In my notes, I wrote down 4 specific scenes that to me came off as extremely terrible depictions of rape. Chapter 16 being the gun scene. Chapter 18, he breaks into her room, tapes her mouth shut and binds her with rope and then does it again. And then there's chapter 21 where he forces himself on her again. And then in chapter 23, we see a very, very specific trauma response from Adeline where he goes to do it again to her and then she, initiates it herself under the guise of, reclaiming her position in this relationship. She says, and I quote, I took control of the situation. My terms, not his. Many people have pointed out that this is a very common trauma response where victims try and take control of the situation they're in. When victims try and regain the power they have in that situation, but really they are still being abused. These scenes were what I wrote down for the main examples of assault in this series, and while in my version I would still keep the fact that he does abuse Adeline, I would not write it in such graphic detail, because these scenes are written in the prose of a 12-year-old on Wattpad. They are written extremely childishly for scenes that are supposed to depict rape. At one point, when Zaid is literally raping Adeline, he says to her, "You're so effing creamy." What do you mean? This is supposed to be a scene where he is assaulting her. Why is this? What is going on? See what I mean when I said this is the sort of content you would see on Wattpad? This is a rape scene written like an amateur fanfic you'd find on AO3. The adjectives used by the author are so odd to use in the context of a scene where your female main character is being brutalized. And this is why so many people are saying this reads like fanfiction, not a published novel. The author writes rape scenes in the same prose as she does as just general smut scenes, which is the main problem for me. The fact that in this book there is depiction of SA is not the problem I have, it's the fact that it is handled so poorly and is written like an amateur fanfic instead of treated with the serious nature that it needs. And while the author claims that she is also a victim and that she wrote this book to cope with her own trauma, the way that she depicts SA is incredibly immature. So if I was to rewrite this, I would absolutely treat the SA with the seriousness that it needs. I would not go into as much detail. I would mostly focus on the aftermath of what it's done to her. See the movie Sorry Baby. That, in my opinion, is one of my favourite depictions of SA because it doesn't really show you what happens at all. It focuses on the aftermath. We don't need an in-depth graphic scene to show you what is done, and while I would include some description, it would not read as amateur smut. It would be much more serious than "you're so effing creamy." And while I would want to show Adeline feeling these feelings of Stockholm Syndrome, I also do want to provide this character with a voice of reason, such as changing her best friend from encouraging her to sleep with him to being a voice of reason, telling her that this is not normal and that she should really seek help, instead of literally calling her a slut like she does in the original book, which is still annoying me. I would explore Adeline's feelings of, why do I feel attracted to him when he's hurt me so much? Why do I feel this way? But I would also have her try and work through these feelings instead of being encouraged by her friend to seek him out and carry this relationship on. And that is literally pretty much all I would change. I would remove any sort of racial or religious discrimination. I would remove any and all references to conspiracy theories. I would also change the trajectory of Zaid's character, and I would also not have these two become a couple. That is literally all I would change. Oh, that and not treating SA scenes as if they were smart. That is literally it. And I would also not label this book a dark romance, as nothing about this is romantic. This is a victim facing extreme feelings of Stockholm Syndrome because she has been SA'd multiple times and doesn't have anyone to support her through this. This is a horror story. This is not romantic. And that is pretty much all I have to say. That's what I would change about the book. I highly doubt you made it this far, but if you did, genuinely, thank you so much. I would really appreciate a like or a sub. I know, shameless begging. I also have channel memberships open if you want to support the channel even more. Obviously, you don't have to, but it would mean so much to me if you did become a member or you did make a one-time purchase. I would be so grateful. Shout out to the first member of the channel, Lilith, you're awesome. I also do have commissions open on my Instagram, so if you want me to draw you something, I absolutely will. Just hit me a DM. I am also selling this painting if you're interested. I don't know what price to set it at, so if you genuinely are interested, just send a DM. Again, I also have a Redbubble shop if you're interested in some quirky designs. I know this is shameless plugging, but if you made it this far, thank you so much, and that's about it. Goodbye.